What happens when a sheltered young woman is given to a widowed Comanche warrior with 3 children? Her journey into an unfamiliar world will challenge everything she thought she knew about life, duty, and love. Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. In the spring of 1872, the small settlement of Willow Creek, Texas, was bustling with the usual activities of frontier life. Sarah Mitchell stood at the window of her family's modest wooden home, watching the golden sunset paint the distant plains. At 25, she was considered a spinster by most standards of the time, having devoted her youth to caring for her ailing mother, who had passed just 3 months prior. "Sarah, come sit down," her father, Thomas Mitchell, called from the dining table. His weathered face looked even more tired than usual as he gestured to the empty chair across from him. Sarah smoothed her simple cotton dress and took a seat, noting the unusual solemnity in her father's expression. "Is something wrong, Father?" Thomas cleared his throat. "I've been corresponding with Chief Running Bear of the Comanche tribe to the west. You know we've maintained a peaceful trading relationship with them for years now." "Yes," Sarah nodded, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "The chief has a proposition that would strengthen our alliance and ensure protection for our settlement." Thomas paused, avoiding his daughter's eyes. His nephew, Swift Arrow, lost his wife to fever last winter. He's left with 3 young children and needs a wife. Sarah's hands froze in her lap. "Father, what are you saying?" "The chief has proposed a marriage between you and Swift Arrow. He's a respected warrior, about 35 years of age. The arrangement would secure peace between our peoples and provide you with a family of your own." Sarah felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "You wish me to marry a Comanche man I've never met? To leave everything I know?" "I know it's unexpected," Thomas said, his voice softening. "But times are hard, Sarah. Since your mother's passing, our situation has become precarious. This alliance could save not just us, but the entire settlement." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. I'm not..." She stumbled over her words, unable to express that at 25. She remained untouched by any man, having dedicated herself to her family rather than seeking a husband. Thomas reached across the table to take her trembling hand. "Swift Arrow is known to be honorable. The chief assures me you will be treated with respect, and the children need a mother." "When?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 weeks, enough time to prepare." Thomas squeezed her hand. "I wouldn't ask this of you if I saw another way." Later that night, Sarah sat on her bed, staring at the small trunk where she kept her few possessions. The weight of her father's request pressed down upon her shoulders. She had always imagined that someday she might marry, perhaps to one of the settlers' sons, but never had she considered becoming the wife of a Comanche warrior. What would her life be like among the native people? How would she care for children who weren't her own, who didn't speak her language? And the intimacy of marriage, the thought made her cheeks flush with both fear and embarrassment. Sarah's closest friend, Emily Watson, visited the next day after hearing the news. "You can't seriously be considering this," Emily said, pacing the small bedroom. "To be given to a savage, it's barbaric." Sarah winced at her friend's words. "Father says the Comanche have been peaceful trading partners for years. Swift Arrow is the nephew of their chief. But to live among them? To share a bed with one of them?" Emily's voice dropped to a scandalized whisper. "I have no choice," Sarah replied, folding a simple dress to place in her trunk. "Father believes this alliance will protect Willow Creek. I must do my duty." Emily sat beside her friend, taking Sarah's hands in hers. "You've always put others before yourself. But this is your life, Sarah, your future. Perhaps this is my purpose," Sarah said quietly, though uncertainty lingered in her heart. "To bridge 2 worlds, to care for children who need a mother." As the days passed, Sarah prepared for her new life with a mixture of dread and determination. She sewed new clothes, packed her few treasures, and tried to learn what little she could about Comanche customs from the town's only schoolteacher, who had once lived near another native tribe. The night before her departure, Sarah stood once more at her window, gazing at the familiar landscape she had known all her life. Tomorrow she would travel to the Comanche camp to meet the man who would become her husband, a man from a different world, a widower with 3 children. Sleep eluded her as questions tumbled through her mind. Would she ever see her father or Willow Creek again? Would she ever adapt to a new way of life? And most frightening of all, how would she fulfill the duties of a wife when she had never known a man's touch? With the first light of dawn, Sarah dressed in her best clothes, a simple blue dress her mother had helped her sew years ago. As she pinned her honey-brown hair into a neat bun, she gazed at her reflection in the small hand mirror. Her green eyes, usually bright and determined, now showed the fear she was trying desperately to hide. "I am Sarah Mitchell," she whispered to herself. "I am strong. I will face whatever comes with courage." But as the wagon carrying her and her father approached the agreed meeting place at the edge of Comanche territory, her resolve wavered. In the distance, several riders on horseback waited, their straight postures marking them as warriors. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. Her new life was about to begin, and she had never felt less prepared for what lay ahead. The journey to the Comanche camp took most of the day. Sarah sat rigid beside her father in the wagon, watching as the familiar landscapes of her childhood receded and gave way to open plains and scattered groves. They were accompanied by 2 Comanche warriors who had met them at the territorial boundary, stoic men who spoke little, but watched the horizon with keen eyes. By late afternoon, they crested a gentle hill, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of the Comanche encampment, spread out in a shallow valley. Dozens of conical teepees formed a large circle, with horses grazing nearby, and the smoke from cooking fires rising into the clear blue sky. Children darted between the dwellings, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "It's larger than I expected," Sarah murmured, clutching her small bundle of personal belongings. Thomas nodded. "The Comanche are powerful on these plains. This is just one of their bands." As they approached, people began to gather, watching the wagon with undisguised curiosity. Sarah felt her cheeks flush under their scrutiny. Women in decorated buckskin dresses pointed and whispered. Children stared openly before being shooed away by their mothers. The wagon halted near the center of the camp. A distinguished older man stepped forward, his long hair adorned with eagle feathers, his bearing dignified and commanding. "Chief Running Bear," Thomas said with respect, climbing down from the wagon and helping Sarah descend. The chief nodded. "Thomas Mitchell, you have brought your daughter as promised." Sarah stood with her eyes downcast, heart racing. She could feel the weight of dozens of gazes upon her. "This is my daughter, Sarah," Thomas said, his voice betraying a slight tremor. Sarah forced herself to look up, meeting the chief's evaluating gaze with as much dignity as she could muster. "She is welcome among the people," Running Bear said after a moment. He turned and gestured to a man standing slightly behind him. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw Swift Arrow for the first time. He stood taller than most of the men around him, his copper skin stretched over strong features. His black hair hung in 2 neat braids, and while his face remained impassive, his dark eyes studied her with undeniable intensity. "My nephew, Swift Arrow," the chief introduced, "a respected warrior of our people." Swift Arrow stepped forward, and Sarah noticed a slight limp in his right leg. Later she would learn it was the result of a hunting accident years before. He spoke in his native tongue, and the chief translated. "He says you are welcome to his lodge. He has prepared a place for you." Sarah's throat felt dry as she managed a small nod. Swift Arrow did not smile, but neither did his expression show displeasure. He simply regarded her with a cautious assessment that matched her own. A small commotion drew Sarah's attention. 3 children approached, 2 boys and a girl, the eldest no more than 10 years old, the youngest perhaps 4. They partially hid behind an older woman but peered at Sarah with undisguised curiosity. "Swift Arrow's children," Thomas whispered to his daughter. "Your new family." The reality of her situation crashed over Sarah like a cold wave. These were to be her children now. This imposing stranger her husband. This foreign place her home. The time for goodbyes came too quickly. Thomas embraced his daughter, his voice thick with emotion. "You have always been the bravest of souls, Sarah. Your mother would be proud." He pressed something into her hand, a small brooch that had belonged to her mother. "Remember who you are." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she watched her father's wagon grow smaller in the distance. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. A new chapter of her life was beginning, whether she was ready or not. Swift Arrow led her through the camp to his teepee, which stood larger than many of the others. The older woman who had been with the children followed, carrying Sarah's small trunk. Inside, Sarah found a dwelling far more comfortable than she had imagined. Clean, warm, with beautifully tanned hides covering the floor and smoke-blackened poles rising to a vent at the top. Through gestures and the few English words he knew, Swift Arrow showed her where she would sleep, where his children slept, where food was prepared. The older woman, Swift Arrow's mother, Yellow Flower, watched Sarah with sharp, assessing eyes. That first evening passed in a blur of strange food, unfamiliar customs, and the constant strain of trying to communicate without a shared language. The children, Running Wolf, Little Deer, and the youngest boy, Hawk, kept their distance, whispering among themselves and casting curious glances at the pale-skinned woman who had entered their home. When night fell, Sarah's anxiety peaked. What would be expected of her? But Swift Arrow merely indicated her sleeping place, a separate pallet of soft furs, and retired to his own on the opposite side of the teepee. The children slept between them, an arrangement that filled Sarah with both relief and confusion. Later, as she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the camp, Yellow Flower entered the teepee and sat beside her. The older woman's weathered face was stern in the dim firelight. "My son," she said in halting English, surprising Sarah. "Good man. Children need mother." She placed a hand on Sarah's arm. "You learn our ways, we learn yours. Slow." The simple statement contained both instruction and reassurance. Sarah realized that Swift Arrow's mother must have insisted on this arrangement, allowing time for adjustment before the marriage was truly consummated. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. Yellow Flower nodded once and returned to her own teepee nearby. In the flickering light of the dying fire, Sarah studied the sleeping forms of the children who were to become hers. The little girl, Little Deer, clutched a small doll made of corn husks. The boys slept with the abandon of childhood, their dark hair falling across their peaceful faces, and beyond them, Swift Arrow's strong profile was visible against the teepee wall. Her future husband, a man she did not know, could barely communicate with, from a world entirely different from her own. "Give me strength," Sarah whispered into the darkness, clutching her mother's brooch. "Give me wisdom to find my place here." Outside, the night winds whispered through the camp, carrying the distant howl of a coyote across the vast Texas plains. Sarah Mitchell, raised in a settler's cabin, schooled in Christian teachings, unmarried at 25, closed her eyes and tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring in her new life among the Comanche people. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new experiences, as Sarah struggled to adapt to life in the Comanche camp. Each morning, she woke at dawn to help Yellow Flower and the other women prepare the morning meal. The older woman had taken it upon herself to instruct Sarah in Comanche ways, displaying a surprising patience despite the language barrier. "Like this," Yellow Flower would demonstrate, showing Sarah how to properly prepare pemmican or tan a hide. Sarah's hands were soon rough and stained from unfamiliar work, but she tackled each task with determination. The children remained wary, particularly 10-year-old Running Wolf, who watched her with suspicious eyes. Little Deer, at 7, was more curious than hostile, sometimes lingering near Sarah as she worked. 4-year-old Hawk was the first to warm to her, approaching one afternoon as Sarah sat mending a tear in one of Swift Arrow's shirts. "Watseka?" the little boy asked, pointing to a colorful bird perched on a nearby branch. Sarah smiled, realizing he wanted to know the English word. "Bird," she said clearly. "That is a bird." "Bud," Hawk repeated, giggling at the strange sound. He pointed to himself. "Hawk." "Yes, Hawk." Sarah nodded. "You are Hawk." The simple exchange marked a turning point. That evening, as they sat around the fire inside the teepee, Hawk crawled into Sarah's lap, pointing to objects and asking for their English names. Little Deer edged closer, her curiosity overcoming her reserve. Only Running Wolf maintained his distance, though Sarah occasionally caught him listening intently. Swift Arrow observed these interactions with inscrutable eyes. He and Sarah had developed a careful routine, communicating through gestures and the few words they shared in each other's languages. Though they slept apart, with the children between them, Sarah was acutely aware of his presence, his quiet strength, the gentleness he showed his children, the respect he commanded among his people. One morning, about 3 weeks after Sarah's arrival, Swift Arrow beckoned her to follow him outside the camp. Curious, she walked beside him to a small grove of trees, where a beautiful buckskin mare was tethered. "For you," he said in English, gesturing to the horse. "Woman need horse." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. The gift of a horse was significant. She had learned enough about Comanche culture to understand that horses were central to their way of life and highly valued. "Thank you," she said, both in English and in the Comanche phrase Yellow Flower had taught her. She approached the mare cautiously, stroking its sleek neck. "She's beautiful." Swift Arrow nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "You ride." Sarah hesitated. She had ridden horses in Willow Creek, but never bareback as the Comanche did. "A little," she admitted. What followed was her first real lesson from Swift Arrow himself. With patience and firm guidance, he showed her how to mount and control the horse using just her weight and pressure from her legs. They spent the morning practicing, and by midday Sarah was flushed with exhilaration and a new confidence. As they walked back to camp, leading the mare, Swift Arrow spoke more than he ever had before, mixing Comanche words with broken English. "My wife," he said, touching his chest where his heart would be. "She good woman, good mother. Fever take her." He looked at Sarah directly. "Children need mother. I need—" He searched for the word. "Partner." Sarah was struck by the simple honesty of his statement. "I will try to be a good mother to your children," she replied slowly, hoping he understood. Swift Arrow nodded. "You learn fast. Strong spirit." After a pause, he added, "Not force. When ready." His meaning was clear, and Sarah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. He was acknowledging that their marriage remained unconsummated and assuring her he would not rush her. That evening, as Yellow Flower helped Sarah prepare the evening meal, the older woman spoke unexpectedly about her son. "Swift Arrow good hunter, good father," she said, grinding dried corn into meal. "First wife mourning dove, his heart's choice. He grieve long time." She glanced at Sarah. "Now children need mother. Tribe needs strong families." Sarah nodded, understanding the practical nature of her arranged marriage. Did he agree to this marriage willingly? Yellow Flower's weathered face softened slightly. He respect Chief's wisdom. See, white woman could teach children English ways. Important for future. She paused. He say you have kind eyes, gentle hands. The revelation that Swift Arrow had noticed such things about her sent an unexpected warmth through Sarah's chest. As the weeks turned into a month, Sarah's place in the camp slowly solidified. She learned to cook Comanche foods, helped the women gather wild plants for medicine and food, and spent hours each day with the children, teaching them English words while they taught her their language. Even Running Wolf had begun to thaw, especially after Sarah mended his favorite hunting shirt that had been torn during a scuffle with another boy. One evening, as a summer storm rolled across the plains, the family huddled inside the teepee, listening to thunder crash overhead. Little Deer trembled, frightened by the loud noise. Without thinking, Sarah pulled the girl into her lap and began to sing a lullaby her own mother had sung to her. The simple melody filled the teepee, rising above the sound of rain pattering against the hide walls. When she finished, Sarah looked up to find Swift Arrow watching her, an unreadable expression in his dark eyes. Little Deer had fallen asleep in her arms, and even the boys seemed calmed by the song. "Again," Swift Arrow said softly. "Sing again." And so she did, her voice gaining confidence as she repeated the gentle lullaby. As the storm raged outside, something shifted inside the teepee, a tentative bond forming between these 5 souls from different worlds. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Swift Arrow spoke to her across the dying embers of the fire. "Tomorrow," he said, "we hunt buffalo. I show you Comanche way." Sarah nodded, both apprehensive and excited at the prospect of witnessing this important aspect of Comanche life. As she lay down to sleep, she realized that for the first time since arriving, she had gone a whole day without feeling like a stranger in a strange land. The buffalo hunt was like nothing Sarah had ever experienced. The thundering hooves, the skilled riders darting fearlessly among the massive beasts, the precise shots from bows, and the few rifles the tribe possessed. She watched from a safe distance with Yellow Flower and the other women, her heart in her throat, as Swift Arrow rode into the midst of the herd. When it was over, the tribe celebrated their successful hunt with feasting and dancing. Sarah sat with the children, watching as warriors reenacted their brave deeds. Swift Arrow approached, still flushed from the hunt, and to her surprise, held out his hand to her. "Come," he said. "Dance." Sarah hesitated, aware of curious eyes upon them. This would be a public acknowledgement of their developing relationship. After a moment, she placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her into the circle of dancers. The rhythmic beating of drums filled the night air, as Swift Arrow taught her the simple steps of a Comanche celebration dance. His hand was warm against her waist, his movements sure and strong despite his slight limp. For the first time since her arrival, Sarah felt something beyond duty or resignation, a spark of connection to this man who was her husband, in name only. As they danced beneath the stars, with firelight casting golden light across their faces, Sarah caught a glimpse of a possible future, one where two people from vastly different worlds might forge a bond based on respect, shared purpose, and perhaps, in time, even love. The summer waned, bringing cooler nights and subtle changes to the landscape around the Comanche camp. 3 months had passed since Sarah's arrival, and with each passing day her understanding of her new life deepened. The language barrier, while still present, had diminished as she learned more Comanche words and the children improved their English. Even Running Wolf, the most resistant of the three, now proudly served as translator when needed. One crisp morning, as Sarah helped Yellow Flower prepare hides for the coming winter, a commotion rose from the edge of camp. Warriors rode in at speed, their expressions grim. Swift Arrow was among them, immediately seeking out Chief Running Bear for a council. "What's happening?" Sarah asked Yellow Flower, her heart quickening with concern. The older woman's face was tense. "Riders come, say white soldiers moving west, breaking treaties again." Sarah's blood ran cold. She had heard stories of conflicts between soldiers and native tribes, the broken promises and bloodshed on both sides. Now, the distant troubles of the frontier threatened to touch her new family directly. That evening, Swift Arrow returned to their teepee later than usual, his face drawn with worry. The children were already asleep, their peaceful breathing a counterpoint to the tension in the air. "Bad news?" Sarah asked quietly, handing him a bowl of stew she had kept warm. Swift Arrow nodded, accepting the food but setting it aside untasted. "Soldiers build new fort. Too close." He made a sweeping gesture with his hand. "Our hunting grounds." Sarah moved to sit beside him, closer than she normally would. "Will there be fighting?" His dark eyes met hers, conflicted emotions visible in their depths. "Chief says wait. Watch. Some young warriors want warpath." He shook his head. "I have children. You, not want war." The simple inclusion of her in his concerns touched Sarah deeply. She realized that somewhere in these months of careful coexistence, Swift Arrow had come to value her presence in his life. "What will happen?" she asked. "Tomorrow I go with Chief. Talk to White Officer." His gaze intensified. "You come too. Speak our words in white man's tongue." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You want me to translate?" Swift Arrow nodded. "Chief says white soldiers see Comanche with white wife. Maybe listen better." He hesitated. "Dangerous, maybe. You decide." The request marked a profound shift in her position within the tribe. No longer just a foreign bride brought to care for motherless children. She was being asked to serve as a bridge between two worlds, her old life and her new one. "I'll go," she said firmly. "If I can help prevent bloodshed, I will." Something like pride flickered in Swift Arrow's eyes. Without warning, he reached out to touch her cheek with calloused fingers. "Brave woman, good heart." The gentle touch sent warmth spreading through Sarah's body. It was the first time he had touched her with anything approaching intimacy, and she found herself leaning slightly into his hand before he withdrew it. The next morning, Sarah dressed carefully in a blend of her original clothing and Comanche garments, a practical compromise she had adopted over the months. Yellow Flower braided her hair in the Comanche style, but allowed her to wear her mother's brooch pinned at her throat. "Be careful," the older woman said, as Sarah prepared to leave. "Soldiers not always see clearly." Sarah nodded, understanding the warning. She mounted her buckskin mare, she'd become a confident rider under Swift Arrow's tutelage, and joined the small delegation heading to meet with the military representatives. The meeting took place on neutral ground, a flat stretch of prairie halfway between the Comanche camp and the area where soldiers had been spotted. As they approached, Sarah saw a group of uniformed men waiting beside their horses. Her heart raced at this first encounter with people from her former world since leaving Willow Creek. Chief Running Bear spoke first, with Sarah carefully translating his words about respected boundaries, treaties made in good faith, and the tribe's desire for peace. The military captain, a stern-faced man named Henderson, listened with barely concealed impatience. "Tell them the fort will be built according to government orders," he replied when the chief had finished. "These lands have been designated for settlement. The Comanche must relocate to the reservation assigned to them." Sarah translated his words, watching the darkening expressions of the Comanche leaders. She chose her translations carefully, softening the captain's brusque tone while maintaining the substance of his message. When Swift Arrow stepped forward to speak, she felt a surge of pride at his dignified bearing. He spoke of his children, of the tribe's connection to these particular hunting grounds, of their willingness to share but not abandon their ancestral lands. Captain Henderson's dismissive response made Sarah's temper flare. Without thinking, she added her own voice to the negotiation. "Captain, I lived among settlers before joining the Comanche," she said, meeting his surprised gaze directly. "I've seen both sides. These people have honored their agreements. They ask only for the same respect in return." The captain stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You're a white woman. Why would you defend savages over your own kind?" Sarah straightened her spine. "They are my family now. And they are not savages. They are people with customs, laws, and deep love for their children and their land." She gestured to Swift Arrow. "This man has taught me more about honor and respect than many I knew in settlement towns." Her passionate defense created a moment of stunned silence. Then, unexpectedly, a younger officer stepped forward. "Captain, perhaps we should consider Lieutenant Marshall's proposal. The fort could be repositioned further east without compromising its strategic value. That would leave the western hunting grounds open." A lengthy discussion followed, with Sarah translating back and forth. By the end of the meeting, a tentative compromise had been reached. The fort would be built at an alternate location, and the Comanche would grant safe passage to military couriers along designated routes. As they rode back to camp, Chief Running Bear nodded approvingly at Sarah. "You speak with strong heart. Help people." But it was Swift Arrow's quiet words that meant the most to her. Riding close beside her, he said simply, "Proud you are my wife." That evening, the tribe celebrated the peaceful resolution with a special meal. Sarah sat among them, no longer feeling like an outsider, but as a valued member of the community. The children sensed the change, too. Little Deer braided a leather strip into Sarah's hair, declaring, "Now you pretty like Comanche mother." Later, after the children had fallen asleep, Swift Arrow and Sarah sat together outside the teepee, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. The night air was cool, and without comment, he draped a warm buffalo robe around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, "both for the robe and for everything the day had represented. I never imagined my life would lead me here." Swift Arrow was silent for a moment, his profile strong against the firelight. "When chiefs say I take white wife, I angry," he admitted. "Think you weak, afraid, not understand our ways." Sarah smiled at his honesty. "I was afraid." "Not now," he said, turning to face her. "Now you ride, speak, stand strong with people." His hand found hers beneath the buffalo robe. "Now, you true wife." The simple words carried profound meaning. Sarah's heart quickened as his fingers intertwined with hers. This was no arranged obligation now. This was a choice being made by two people who had learned to see beyond their differences. "The children love you," he continued. "My mother say you good daughter. He paused, searching for words. "I see you. Strong spirit, beautiful heart." Sarah felt tears well in her eyes at this unexpected declaration. "I have come to care for them deeply, and for you," she added softly. Swift Arrow's other hand rose to touch her cheek, just as he had the night before, but this time his touch lingered. "Tonight, if you willing, no more separate sleeping." The invitation was clear, delivered with respect and without pressure. Sarah knew this moment represented the final step in their unusual journey from strangers to true partners. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. "Yes," she whispered, "I am ready to be your wife in all ways." His smile, rare and transformative, changed his entire face. Swift Arrow leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to hers in their first kiss. The contact was brief but filled with promise. Later that night, after tenderly moving the children to their own sleeping area, husband and wife truly became one beneath the buffalo robes. Sarah discovered that Swift Arrow's strength was matched by gentleness, his passion tempered with care for her inexperience. What had begun as duty blossomed into desire, and what had been arranged by others was now freely chosen by both. 1 year later, Sarah stood outside their teepee, watching as Swift Arrow taught Running Wolf and Hawk how to make arrows. Little Deer sat nearby, practicing the beadwork Yellow Flower had been teaching her. In Sarah's arms, a small bundle stirred. Their 3-month-old daughter, Morning Star, born with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. The baby represented more than just the union of two people. She was a bridge between cultures, carrying the blood of both worlds in her veins. Sarah had written to her father months ago, and he had visited once, marveling at how completely his daughter had adapted to her new life. Relations between the settlement and the tribe had improved, with trade increasing and tensions diminishing. "Sarah," Swift Arrow called, using her name as he always did, never having adopted the Comanche naming customs for his white wife. "Come see what boys make." She walked toward her family, bouncing the baby gently in her arms. The path that had led her here, from frightened bride to confident woman, from stranger to beloved wife and mother, had not been easy. There had been misunderstandings, cultural clashes, and difficult adjustments on both sides. But looking at Swift Arrow's face, now so familiar and dear to her, Sarah knew that what had once seemed like the end of her world had actually been just the beginning. Two people from vastly different worlds had found common ground in mutual respect, shared purpose, and eventually deep and abiding love. As the Texas sun warmed her face and her husband's arm slipped around her waist, Sarah Mitchell, now both Comanche wife and cultural ambassador, realized that sometimes the most unlikely unions created the strongest bonds of all.